town of Willow Creek was no stranger to hardship. But even among the weathered faces and weary souls, none carried as heavy a burden as Clara Dawson, a young widow left with nothing but a sickly child and a broken heart after her husband's sudden death in the mines. She had once been radiant, filled with laughter and music. But grief had hollowed her cheeks and poverty had stripped her of dignity until she stood on the courthouse steps one cold morning, clutching her little boy to her chest as two men from the county threatened to take him away. They claimed she could not provide, that the boy would starve under her care, that the law demanded he be placed with wealthier guardians. The child wept into her torn dress, his little fists clutching desperately at her arms, while Clara fell to her knees before the stern officials, her voice breaking as she begged, "Please don't take my child away. He is all I have." The crowd gathered, some whispering with pity, others turning away, unwilling to meet the agony in her eyes. But standing on the edge of the square, silent as a stone among the murmuring, was a man known to everyone and understood by few, Ethan Cole, a rancher whose silence was both shield and sword, a man who had seen war, buried family, and built walls so high no one dared to climb them. He was tall, broad, his hat pulled low, his jaw set like granite, and for years he had spoken little more than necessity demanded. Folks said he had no softness left in him, no kindness left to give. But as he watched Clara's hands shake, her body trembling as she tried to hold on to her boy, something old and aching stirred in his chest. For he remembered the day death had stolen his own family, leaving him alone on the wide ranch with nothing but silence for company. He remembered the helplessness, the rage, the grief, and he could not watch another soul drown in it. And so, while the officials barked their orders and the widow's cries filled the square, Ethan took one step forward, then another, his boots striking like thunder on the boards, and for the first time in years, the silent rancher spoke. The crowd turned as Ethan Cole's voice cut through the chaos, low and steady but carrying the weight of authority earned, not given. "The boy stays with his mother," he said, his eyes fixed on the men who dared threaten to tear apart what little family remained to Clara. The officials blinked, startled, for Ethan was a man who rarely involved himself in town matters, preferring his cattle and his solitude over politics. Yet here he stood, unyielding, his presence commanding the kind of respect that couldn't be ignored. Clara, still on her knees, looked up at him in shock, her lips parting but no words coming out, her tears freezing as hope and disbelief warred inside her. The men from the county recovered their composure quickly, scoffing at the rancher, declaring that law was law, that pity could not fill a child's stomach, nor keep him warm in winter. Ethan let them finish, then stepped closer, his towering frame casting them in shadow, his silence louder than their bluster, until finally he spoke again. "You think hunger is solved by tearing a child from his mother?" he asked, his tone sharp as a blade. "You think comfort matters more than love? Then you've never seen a child break without it." The boy buried his face against Clara, peeking up at Ethan with wide eyes, sensing in him a strength he had never known from any man since his father's passing. Ethan turned to the officials once more. "If it's money you want, if it's a roof and food, then I'll see to it myself. Clara and her boy will not be cast aside while I still draw breath." Gasps ran through the crowd, whispers rising like wind through grass. The silent rancher, the man who kept to himself, was offering not just words but responsibility. The officials, unsettled, tried to argue, tried to remind him that charity did not last forever, that the law required more than sentiment. But Ethan's eyes, hard as iron, met theirs without flinching. "Then write it on your papers," he said. "I'll sign whatever you need. From this day forward, I'll stand surety for Clara Dawson and her son. They'll have my name to shield them." And with those words, the fate of the widow and her boy shifted like a door opening from darkness into light, and for the first time, Clara's trembling stilled as she realized the rancher had given her more than help. He had given her hope. Life did not magically soften with Ethan's vow, but it transformed in ways Clara never imagined possible. Within a week, she and her son, little Samuel, moved on to Ethan's sprawling ranch, a land wide and wild with endless fields and skies so big they could swallow sorrow whole. Clara worked hard, determined not to be a burden. She cooked meals, tended the small garden, mended clothes, and even learned to help in the barns, her delicate hands growing calloused, her once hesitant spirit finding purpose in labor. Samuel flourished like a sapling finally given water, his cheeks filling with color, his laughter ringing across the yard as he chased chickens, fed calves, and clung to Ethan's legs as though the rancher were a mountain that would never fall. At first, Ethan kept his distance, his silence still a heavy cloak. But Clara noticed the small cracks in his armor, the way he watched Samuel with a softness he thought no one saw, the way his rough hands gentled when guiding the boy on a horse, the way his eyes lingered on Clara when he thought she wasn't looking. She, too, carried scars, but slowly she began to breathe again, to smile again, her heart learning that strength and kindness could exist together in one man. The townsfolk gossiped, some scoffing that it was pity that bound Ethan to them, others whispering that perhaps the silent rancher had finally found his reason to live. But Clara ignored their voices, for she saw truth in Ethan's actions. The long hours he worked to keep the ranch thriving. The quiet way he always set aside the choicest cut of meat for Samuel. The unspoken promise in his gaze when it met hers. Nights were still lonely sometimes, and grief did not vanish overnight. But Clara found herself whispering prayers of gratitude, for what had once been despair was now a beginning, and what had once been the threat of losing her child had become the gift of a new family slowly taking root in the dust. Seasons turned, and with them the bond between Clara, Samuel, and Ethan grew stronger than any law, any gossip, any storm that life could throw. Samuel began to call Ethan Pa without prompting, and though the rancher stiffened the first time, his eyes burned with tears he refused to shed, his heart swelling with a joy he thought long buried. Clara, once fearful of being a burden, learned that love was not a debt to be repaid, but a gift freely given. And in quiet moments by the fire, when Samuel slept between them, Ethan would let his hand rest over hers, rough fingers brushing her skin as though afraid to want too much. But want grew into need, and need into love, until the day Ethan finally broke his silence once more. Standing on the porch as the sun dipped low, painting the prairie gold, he turned to Clara and said, "I thought my life ended the day I lost mine. But you and Samuel, you gave it back to me. If you'll have me, Clara, I'd spend the rest of it making sure neither of you ever begs again." Her breath caught. Her tears fell, and for the first time since her husband's death, she let herself dream of a future. She whispered yes, not because she needed saving anymore, but because she had found a man who chose to stand by her when the world turned away. And so the widow who once wept on courthouse steps became the woman who walked proudly beside a rancher, her son safe in arms, stronger than law, stronger than poverty, stronger than sorrow, and their story, told for years in Willow Creek, was remembered not for the moment of despair, but for the moment a silent man stepped forward and changed everything with nothing but courage, loyalty, and love that could never be taken away. If this story touched your heart, if you felt Clara's pain, Samuel's hope, and Ethan's strength, then don't let it end here. Subscribe to the channel and join us for more powerful Western tales of love, sacrifice, and redemption. Every story is a reminder that even in the hardest places, hope can rise again. Hit that bell icon and be part of this journey, because the next story might just step forward for you.